James, certainly known to be a legacy veteran. Craig, known to be a pretty just all-around solid player. And James on the play, and we are underway.
And this matchup is going to be all about leveraging resources. That's what it comes down to here. Getting out on the front foot, whether it's Craig getting a Delver Secrets into play, using Wastelands to keep James off of his action, or James getting out on the front foot with his mana with cards like Deathrite Shaman, enabling him to play cards like Liliana the Veil, Shardless Agent, or Jason the Mind Sculptor, which significantly outclass the cards in Craig's deck.
Yeah, James starts the game on his ideal one-drop. That's going to be Deathrite Shaman, and it passes back to Craig. So, correct me if I'm wrong here, I feel like in this matchup, Craig has to take the aggro role. You said Craig, he can deal damage, he can attack James' lands. I feel like the longer the game goes, if this game gets to turn 10, I feel like it's James's game.
A pretty good rule of thumb in Legacy is, if one person has the card Jason the Mind Sculptor in their deck and the other player does not, the player who does not is probably the control deck.
Probably the aggro deck.
The aggro deck, rather, excuse me. So Craig's deck is a beatdown deck. It can play control in some matchups, but this is not one of them. As you see, James miss his second land here with Brainstorm and is now Brainstorm locked.
This is huge. Craig major stop him from playing the game. So James had a turn 1 Deathrite. Craig swords it. James came back, brainstormed, tried to find a land, did not find it, and then Craig untaps, wastes away James' land, plays a Delver, passes the turn.
Now, Craig may not play as much Magic as he used to, but I'm sure he's played enough to know to wasteland James in that spot.
When James misses the land, he'll be like, well, that's a shame. Yeah. And you see Craig actually with another Wasteland at the ready. He does not flip his Delver, but he may score a flawless victory here, keeping James off all permanents and life points. You see, so Craig develops his mana base, second fetch into a Volcanic Island, makes Stoneforge Mystic, and we are done. James has no desire to play this further.
And I can really appreciate it's now, past 1 o'clock in the morning here. I can definitely appreciate these players' urge to get on with things. So James, not going to bother playing that one out and just going to move on to the sideboard here.
Yeah, calculated risk for James, and he kept his hand. Turn 1 Deathrite Shamans are great for him in the deck. He knew that he had a high upside, but a high risk. So keeping a 1-land Deathrite on the play with Brainstorm. High risk, high reward. The risk hit him that time.
Yep. Welcome back to the booth. Trivia time.
All
right. A little faster than maybe we were anticipating.
Absolutely. So those of you remembering, if you're just joining us, how this game works, Patrick's going to ask a trivia question. And this is the last one of the night. It's for a year's worth of Star City Games Premium. What you have to do is sign on to Twitter, tweet the correct answer at SCG Live with the hashtag SCG Premium. You see it on the bottom of your screen. And at the conclusion of our finals, one correct answer will be randomly selected to receive a year's worth of Star City Games Premium.
So James Rynkiewicz, former Legacy Grand Prix champion, no stranger to playing all sorts of decks here. The most hyped card out of the most recent Commander product, of course, True Name Nemesis. James is playing no copies of that in his main deck. He does, however, have a single copy of a different Commander card from that very same product. Name that card. Again, tweet at SCG Live and hashtag SCG Premium.
Remember, this is a card from the Commander 2013 set as opposed to the original Commander set. But he does have one in his main deck. At the end of the finals, we will select one of the correct answers to receive a year's worth of Star City Premium.
So, sideboard time. Again, a record. Was that a record speed game for Shardless Bug versus Blue Red Delver we had on camera?
Yeah, for this matchup, yes.
Okay, well, in the sideboard here, Craig's got a Sword of Feast and Famine, 2 copies of Grim Lavamancer, 4 copies of Metal Mage, 2 Rest in Peace, 2 Flush of Storm, 2 Elemental Blast, a Swords of Plowshare, and a Wear Tear.
Now, I'm going to say they're going for a record here. Last time I did a Legacy Open Legacy Open Finals, that was in Dallas. The entire match was over in 8 minutes. So right now, at 3:40, they're going for it.
Yeah, I know that both of these players, again, it's past 1 o'clock. I'm sure they want to leave. I haven't actually seen her on camera, but Craig's wife, Jasmine, is here. I'm sure she would like to start heading home sooner rather than later.
No great way to start a week than staying up until the wee hours of the morning on Sunday night.
Yeah.
No. Looking at the sideboards, let's see the weapons each of them has. So Craig, as the aggressive deck, go through the weapons he has. He has a Sword of Feast and Famine. I'd have to assume against a control deck that's playing both black and green, that's a pretty potent weapon.
It helps him get around annoying blockers like, Tarmogoyf, Baleful Strix, and so forth. I don't necessarily know if he wants Umezawa's Jitte in this matchup. He may just want to go up to 3 pieces of equipment. Batterskull is not bad against James either. It's outside of Abrupt Decay range. It's tough for him to block. If the game goes on for a very long time, you get a lot of value. So Craig might just move up to 3 copies of equipment. I think he also wants the 2 copies of Grim Lavamancer and possibly the 4 Metal Mages as well. James is likely to sideboard into more removal, and just having additional creatures is valuable.
Yeah, on James's side, remember, James is going to embrace the control role here. He just needs to make sure that he has Craig covered on lots of different levels. So looking at the things, I think he wants to shore up his early game. Disfigure, a great card at taking down both Delver of Secrets and Stoneforged Mystic. Have to assume we'll be playing those. Also, True Name Nemesis is in Craig's deck. James doesn't want to be caught without any answers to that, so we will probably see the extra Liliana and Toxic Deluge both boarded in.
The 2 copies of Golgari Charm as well answer both True Name Nemesis and the Grim Lava Mancers that Craig is likely bringing in. So yeah, more sweepers, more removal. Both decks kind of re-establishing their positions post-board. Craig becoming more aggressive and James becoming more defensive.
Do you feel like the matchup shifts one way or another significantly after board?
I think Craig picks up the better part of it. You know, he is playing against some more threatening cards, but a lot of them are expensive in nature, and they play further into the Wasteland Mana Denial strategy that Craig is trying to incorporate anyway.
Yeah, so just the presence of Sword and Feast and Famine is that big.
Yeah.
All right. Remember, Craig will be, or James, apologies, will be on the play again this game. Had a great start last game that petered out almost immediately.
And James getting a little more casual, taking off his his overshirt and revealing, I believe, a Death Row Record shirt. So someone went browsing through a Goodwill recently, I suppose. Unless that's original. If that's an original, that's great. I mean, you know, more power to him. But I suspect some thrift store shopping might have been in order here.
Sure. All right. You said, yeah, James on the play. And that's one of the ways, actually, being on the play is always really good against any sort of Delver Mana Denial strategy. Deathrite Shaman, in particular, can really break that lock that Delver tries to get people under. You know, it just alleviates so much pressure when you have the option of 2 mana right away, like on your first turn.
Yeah, that's the big thing here is James has a huge edge when he's actually able to cast his stuff. Craig's trying to stop him from casting his stuff, and Deathrite Shaman is by far the most powerful tool has at his disposal to try to cast stuff. I mean, it's really that simple.
All right, and we'll see both players getting ready here. I believe we have a sleeve mirror as well.
Yeah.
Always can be confusing. Make sure you always have your own deck. But we are underway. James on the play is going to be keeping Craig as well. So starting off, no Deathrite Shaman this time. James starts on a Misty Rainforest. He knows he does not have to play around Stifle. He'd rather play around Wasteland, so there won't be any fetching there. But Craig, with some early game pressure, that's going to be Delver of Secrets.
Immediately putting James to the test here.
And I believe James has a Hymn to Turok turn 2 here. It's an interesting one. That's one that I know in the Rug Delver matchup you typically don't see from the Shardless Bug player simply because they don't feel like they have time with all the pressure that Rug puts down. Blue-White Rail Delver actually affords its opponents a little more time than Rug does.
Yeah, there's no Nimble Mongoose, and instead there's True Name Nemesis, so there's a little more breathing space.
Yeah. I don't believe they Stifle either, which is a huge one.
Generally, no.
All right, and Craig flips his Delver into Insectile Aberration off of Brainstorm. So a great start for him. We see Sword of Feast and Famine naturally in his hand, as well as a Ponder and a Wasteland. So he can still play this Mana Denial tempo strategy despite being on the draw. And Insectile Aberration crashes in for 3. James with no removal spell. So Craig has his threat.
I think Craig rather is a little surprised that this has happened that way. I think he was expecting at least some piece of removal or something, but his Insectile Aberration came across untouched.
Yeah, and James, it looks like he actually did have an Abrupt Decay here. Yeah, okay. So he's going to go ahead. All right, this is in response to the Wasteland. Yeah, he's going to Abrupt Decay away the Delver. So interestingly enough, James opted to take 3 and leave open the Abrupt Decay as opposed to immediately hitting the Insectile Aberration.
He may want to answer a Stoneforged Mystic instead, being willing to take the 3 that turn, because he has Liliana the Veil in hand. So if Craig has no follow-up,
yeah,
he can just go ahead and tag it.
Yeah, and he may even want to save, like, Abrupt Decay is one of his few cards that answers a card like Sword of Feast and Famine as well. So there's some reason to keep that one around, to try to save that for something more premier, I guess, than an Insectile Aberration. But that's at 3 life's that's a high price to pay.
Yep, for sure. Although James's hand has a lot of tools to work with here, so he may be willing to pay the 3 for just increased flexibility.
All right, Craig uses his mana to ponder, setting up his next draw. James is going to go ahead and wasteland Craig this time. That's an aggressive play from James, but owing to the fact that he has Deathrite Shaman as a follow-up, now James may be the one trying to out-mana Craig.
Yeah, again, both players just trying to leverage their resource advantage, and once you have Deathrite Shaman, you have the ability to do plays like that, wastelanding Craig even though he's the more aggressive deck.
Yeah, so from Craig, we saw a draw of red Elemental Blast. No help there. Craig does have a second land. He has a Brainstorm, a True-Name Nemesis, and what looks to be I think a Rest in Peace as well to take some of James's Tarmogoyfs down to size.
Deathrite Shaman as well. Craig's deck has very little use for the graveyard. If he's brought in the Rest in Peace, it may mean that he has not brought in Grim Lavamancer. They feel like it's one or the other.
Certainly agree. So before Craig is able to put down the Rest in Peace and effectively LD James is going to have one turn on 3 mana, and let's see what he does with it. It's going to be him to Turok to start out with.
Again, just trying to further squeeze Craig's resources.
Yep. This is the first 2-for-1 James has gone for this game. Remember, repeated 2-for-1s. That's the strategy behind Shardless Bug. And we'll see whether or not he can hit. Like, it's going to be really big as whether or not he hits Craig's Rest in Peace. His follow-up play, it looks like it's going to be another Deathrite Shaman. So say he plays him, doesn't hit Rest in Peace or the land, and makes another Deathrite Shaman, then that Rest in Peace from Craig is going to be real huge. It'll be a double LD spell.
But even the Rest in Peace is a bit of a trap here for Craig because it's just another card that he's putting into play that's low impact, and James can easily win this game just by casting Liliana of the Veil, Shardless Agents for value, and so forth.
So Craig brainstorming in response to this him to Turok, and the bad news for him is he's locked on 2 lands right now. You see he drew 3 cards, none of them are lands. He has a second land in his hand, but nothing else. So he gets to hide 2 cards, and he's not hiding his land. So there's a chance that James hits the land and knocks Craig out of this game.
Yeah, Craig's going to weigh this one. I mean, the whole game may come down to which cards he conceals here. There's so many different permutations of what cards can get hit too. It's very complicated.
Sword of Feast and Famine and Stoneforge Mystic hidden. Feast and Famine's not really a card. Like, interesting, Feast and Famine's a card, but he can't cast it, and he's not going to be able to cast it for a while. He has no third land. I don't think he cares. Yeah, he has a Delver and a Brainstorm. I don't think he cares about True Name because he can't cast it. To me, the land seems like the card he cannot afford to get him.
Yeah, he needs to keep that second land.
All right, so he hid land, and I believe it was sword.
Yes.
All right, so those ones are not fair game. Him to Turok here. We'll see what hits. Hits card 6 and hits the Brainstorm and hits the Delver of Secrets. So 2 of Craig's cheaper spells. He's left with a rather expensive hand, and he'll be on 1 spell per turn for a while.
And now James way ahead on mana here with that second copy of Deathrite Shaman.
And here's where the fact that Craig does have that he did keep the second land, and he did get to keep the Rest in Peace. And I think that's what he's going to have to do. I don't think he can afford to let James untap with 4 mana sources.
He still has the hope that James may have nothing else going on in his hand, or he needs the mana from the Deathrite Shaman or their Tarmogoyfs. So Rest in Peace gives him a shot.
Yep, he's going to do it. Rest in Peace exiles both graveyards. The Deathrite Shaman's reduced to Squires. Both players now on 2 mana. And Craig's going to be on 2 mana, we know, for at least 1 more turn. James, just with 3 cards in hand, a little bit of a who can draw out of this first fight. James has a Disfigure and a Liliana in hand. And now Craig will cast his Stoneforge Mystic.
You feel like Wasteland is really the card that can start getting Craig back out.
Yeah, Wasteland would be huge. And a Wasteland from either player would be pretty big.
Yeah.
Obviously, Craig plays 4 Wastelands to the 2 that James has, so it's certainly a play we expect more out of Craig's deck. But more importantly, I think Craig, thanks to Stoneforge Mystic, can actually operate under 2 lands more easily than James's deck can. You see him getting Batter's Claw of Stoneforge. Now, what he doesn't know is that this Stoneforge is not long for the battlefield, and it will get disfigured.
And there's the 3rd land. Felt like it was a race to see who got to this point first.
Yeah. Craig may still be able to break serve if he hits his 3rd land on this following turn, but James is going to start building up a Liliana here thanks to land number 3, and too many of Liliana activations, and he'll leave Craig without any resources.
And the big payoff, the big trump left over in Craig's hand was his copy of True Name Nemesis, which is going to be worth much less going forward.
Oh, and actually, it wasn't even a Liliana there. James also had a Shardless Agent, so now he's flooding the board with creatures. They're not big creatures, but they're creatures.
I think he's just trying to get out in front with as much damage as possible, and you can play Liliana as his last card. Because if Craig plays nothing, then James wants his hand to be empty when he plays Liliana and starts plussing. And if Craig does play something, it's better for him to have less information that Liliana is a threat that's coming.
Yeah. Craig going to go ahead and Red Blast away the Shardless Agent. Not an ideal application of Red Blast, but like you said, Craig just needs to make sure he's still playing things. And the trio of Deathrite Shamans continues the attack on Craig's life total. And what do you make of this? He's not going for Liliana. Maybe he has I think he must have something he's leaving up here. Yeah, it looks like another Disfigure, actually.
Yeah, I don't think he wants to cast into the bolt, into just a bolt for no value if he's not willing to plus it. So might as well just wait.
Yep, 2 Lilianas and a Disfigure now in hand. And the trio of Deathrites continue their attack. One of them eats a Lightning Bolt. Craig drops down to 10.
James showing a great deal of discipline, as he has throughout the entire elimination rounds.
Yeah, still no plays here. All right, so he doesn't want to minus the Liliana, and the reveal from Craig looks like it's Jataxian Probe. The Insectile Apparition flips, and still no Disfigure. All right, Probe going to be cast for Craig. He goes down to 8. And now he gets to see James. Yeah, he has him covered, actually.
Oh, yeah.
That...
You were hoping it wasn't bad. It's bad. Yeah, it's real bad.
This Delver is only living because James wants it to live.
Right.
You see here at the draw there, no help for Craig.
Craig's hand is about as bad as it could be for 4 cards.
Well, they all cost 3. Otherwise, he's got a Batterskull, a Jite, a True Name.
3 pieces of equipment that against a handful of nothing but removal.
I mean, I thought the combo of True Name plus equipment was, how... Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's supposed to be excellent against Shardless Bug.
I don't think it is post-board. Maybe it is. Maybe it is game 1, but...
I mean, his hand is all the equipment and a True Name.
Yeah.
Just all of it.
Yeah, you can't get away from Stoneforge Mystic in the matchup entirely. It's just too powerful, and Batterskull is a great tool in some spots, but in game 1, I think the equipment is much better, but post-board, James has a lot of access to removal spells and...
Now, it is an ironic situation, that he has the entire Voltron in hand, this combo that's usually great in matchups, but with no mana to cast it, those are the most expensive spells in Craig's deck. So we are on to game 3 between Craig and James. Game 1, a quick affair with James keeping a high-risk hand, but not getting there. Game 2, a back-and-forth positional battle that James pulled out of, and now we are on to the decider between the two.
And I think this is going to come down a lot to, James is on the draw. Does he have something to do on the first turn of the game? Shardless Bug is not really flush on turn 1 plays. You have your 4 copies of Deathrite Shaman. That's the best thing that you can be doing. There's a couple of copies of Disfigure he has in the sideboard. That's a great response if Craig has Delver of Secrets. But otherwise, not much to do, and those are the kind of draws that can get blown up by a single Wasteland or just by Craig getting out too fast and backing things up with soft counters.
Yeah, if Craig, especially on the play, Craig can do things like play a turn 1 Delver, then on turn 2 remove, say, a Deathrite Shaman, Wasteland James. If he has a hand like that, he can just really steal a game before James ever gets the deck rolling.
I'm interested to see what Craig wants to do with his copies of Rest in Peace. It is good in the abstract. Of course, James is using his graveyard. Craig is not. But it feels to me like James can just win the game by killing everything that Craig plays. That's a realistic path to victory. And I don't think Craig can win the game by trying to, control James that much or, trying to take away his axes of interaction. I think Craig's best plan is to get out in front and have as many aggressive cards as possible. I think he's better served with things like Grim Lavamancer being in his deck than having cards like Rest in Peace.
Yeah, it speaks more to what we said before was Craig needs to become more aggressive after board as the aggressor, and James becomes more controlling. And while Rest in Peace does have applications against James' deck, don't get me wrong, it's great against Tarmogoyfs, it's great against Deathrite Shamans, it's not really playing to the role that he wants to be playing here.
And it's another target for Golgari Charm as well.
Right.
Because Craig only has the 2 copies of True Name Nemesis and the 2 copies of Grim Lawmancer if he elects to bring them in, or an unflipped Delver of Secrets. You can easily imagine a scenario where James draws Golgari Charm and there's just not a lot to do with it. Rest in Peace makes that less and less likely. So I understand the attractiveness of trying to attack James's graveyard, but that game, game 2 is what I fear. Craig plays Rest in Peace, and James kills everything that Craig plays and beats him to death with 1-2 Deathrite Shamans.
Yeah, the Rest in Peace did a great job of slowing down the game there, actually. But slowing down the game isn't necessarily, like, it's okay, but it's not great for Craig. He's using 2 mana, which is usually a turn for him, to not progress his board state, and I'm not positive he has time to do that against Shardless Bug.
Yeah. So it's going to be, you know, can he get out in the front foot? Does he have Wastelands? Ways to kill Deathrite Shaman. Try to strand James with just less efficient cards. I'm interested to see how much of James, you know, does he leave in Jace the Mind Sculptor in this matchup? Is it only good in games he's already winning?
Well, that's interesting. So I know against Rug Delver, I think the thought is no, to not leave it in. But Blue White Red Delver affords you a little more time. And then conversely, Blue Red Delver can go late a little bit better than Rug Delver can. You know, it does have cards like Stoneforge Mystic and, more importantly, True Name Nemesis that give it some late game.
So I believe one of James's cards here may have fallen, so he's just piling out to make sure that there's 60.
James on 6, or is he just counting his deck?
So yep, 60 cards. It all checks out.
Yeah, and that's probably one of the reasons you see a lot of times in competitive play, players pile shuffle. What I've said, like, for randomization at least, I don't think is necessarily true that you have to pile shuffle. I think for randomization, you want to make sure that you shuffle 2 different ways. It doesn't particularly matter what they are.
Yeah, I think what happened there was a card of James's slipped out of his deck, and he was just making sure nothing hit the floor. So just 8 piling to make sure that there were 60 there.
If not just hit the floor, he wants to make sure that he's not playing 69 and Craig playing, or playing 61 and Craig playing 59. Remember, they have identical sleeves too. But yeah, the really key to pile shuffling, at least probably once during each shuffle, or during each presentation, is that so they make sure that you have the 60 card deck you believe you have. The penalty for presenting a 69 card deck is a game loss, and you really wouldn't want it to happen in a situation like this. All right, and so we are on to game 3. Craig Krempels, number 8 seed, snuck in at X11, the only X11 in the top 8. Well, who had to win the last round to make it into the top 8. We did have some who drew in. But got in with that last round win into the finals. He's on the play. And here we go with our deciding game. Craig starts on Flooded Strand.
And James has to be breathing a sigh of relief here. No Delver of Secrets from Craig.
Yeah, if you look at the hand that James has kept, it certainly is that control style hand. He has Creeping Tar Pit, Abrupt Decay, Brainstorm. It looks like he does have a Wasteland as well.
Looks like Craig with a pretty land-heavy draw right now. And looks to be shortcutting and going and casting Stoneforge Mystic.
Yep, and that should be fine. We'll see what he values here. It could be Batterskull or Sword of Feast and Famine would be my guess. Probably the Sword.
I don't know. I think there's a pretty good argument for getting Batterskull here.
Yeah.
So,
yep, skipping by swords. I think you're right. He's going for the 4/4.
His hand's land-heavy enough where it's realistic for him to cast, and it puts James to the test right now.
Yeah.
If you can't kill this Stoneforge Mystic, Craig has a very, very good chance of winning.
Yeah, and it all depends, like, does he want another threat or does he want protection for his current threats? And you're right, in a land-heavy hand, another threat is probably where he's going to go with it. So back to James. He does have an Abrupt Decay. He can use that to kill the Stoneforge and slow down the Batterskull. He doesn't have... I think that's the only removal he has for Stoneforge. I don't believe he has a Disfigure or one of the more tailored removal spells for Stoneforge.
I'm not positive that's actually a copy of...
It might be Golgari.
I think it might be a Golgari Charm.
I will say that is, as far as from birding someone's hand, those 2 cards, I make that mistake more often than I care to.
Okay. He does have an Abrupt Decay.
Yeah. Green-black 2-drops from RTR that look real similar. But you're right, he has both. I did also see a Golgari Charm. And a replacement copy of Abrupt Decay drawn for James. And normally, we said Shardless doesn't want to be the Wasteland deck in this matchup. However, when you see your opponent playing land 3 and doing nothing, I feel like the equation changes.
You have to assume Craig's hand is pretty just removal heavy or land heavy.
Yeah, it's got to have something, right? And so yeah, removal heavy, land heavy, probably both. And we see James there goes ahead and he wastes Craig off red mana, tries to go for a Deathrite Shaman, but that's going to get Swords to Plowshared. Craig replaces the Volcanic Island, and we are still back on an empty board.
And you can see why Craig gave some pause to this opening hand. It was very land heavy, and he needs to be the aggressor in this matchup. So his hand right now of bolts and spell pierces, he's in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, having the game start on 3 lands apiece isn't where you want to be against Charlotte's Bug. There, as we've seen time and again in this tournament, the deck's very powerful at playing a real good 2-for-1 fair game. If it's who runs out of threats first, you have to think it's James who's favored.
So Craig might be able to find some gas here, but James is flush removal at this point, and can pretty easily handle most of the threats that Craig brings to the table at this stage of things.
Yeah, Craig's going to have to rely on his larger threats in the deck to carry the game. Delver of Secrets isn't going to work anymore. He's going to have to hope to get a true name, maybe stick some equipment on the true name. And, that's going to be hard in the face of cards like Golgari Charm that are actually in the deck to answer true name Nemesis.
Liliana the Veil, Toxic Deluge. James, after board, has, true name Nemesis is still occasionally going to catch him off guard, but he has a variety of answers.
All right, and we'll see here. He does have a Brainstorm. He does have some removal spells. You're right. A lot of Craig's cards are really, they're strong because of their efficiency. Things like Lightning Bolt, things like Spell Pierce. They're great at 1 mana, but when you get to a point in a game where players have 3 to 4 lands, you care more about function than utility. You care that, that your kill spell actually kills something as opposed to how efficiently does it kill it. And we're reaching that point where, these Spell Pierces become worse, these Lightning Bolts become worse, and Abrupt Decay, it doesn't suffer. It's still great.
Yeah. It's about the first 2 turns of the game. Can Craig get something on the board that James can answer? Does James get tagged by a wasteland? Those are the relevant exchanges. Once we get to this stage where James is making his land drops and just kind of doing his stuff under very little pressure, he is a huge favorite.
And we see James just continuing to develop here. He goes ahead and brainstorms, and his hand is just full of removal. He has Abrupt Decay, Golgari Charm. I'm going to put back one of those copies of Abrupt Decay. But I even think he's going to start with a Thoughtseize. I was going to say he has a Shardless Agent too, so he can set up a Cascade if he wants.
And exactly, as you mentioned, Craig's hand just flush with Spell Pierces right now.
Oh, wow. So James is going to get the Batter Skull. That's the card that was most difficult for him to deal with in Craig's hand. And now Craig's hand really doesn't have anything going for it anymore.
Yeah, there's no way for Craig to get that Batter Skull reestablished in his deck. There's no second copy. There's no way to shuffle. So,
no,
and it's been exiled anyway. Yeah. So that is a huge dimension to Craig's attack that is no longer functional.
Yeah, and I doubt that Craig's going to be able to stick a threat on the board for most of the game here. It's just a matter of time till James 2-for-1s, till he starts cascading into Ancestral Visions or resolves a Planeswalker.
And I think James is far enough ahead here where he's contemplating just using Abrupt Decay on this Rest in Peace and starting to attack.
Yeah, just to get his Tarmogoyf going again. Right now, it'd still be if you Abrupt Decay Rest in Peace, the Abrupt Decay actually is still in the graveyard.
Correct.
Right? Rest in Peace is as well?
I don't know. And James
he's asking the same question.
Craig does not know. I think on Resolution, I think the Rest in Peace also goes to the graveyard.
Yeah.
I believe. It would stand to reason if the Abrupt Decay does, so does the...
That they go to the same place?
Yeah, but whatever. The nuances of Magic's rules in this case are just,
Yeah.
Our spotter on the table, Andrew Shrout, seems some amount of confusion. Craig is just willing to accept whatever explanation he receives at this stage.
Yeah, and that's one of the things when you start playing a lot of these tournaments, it's not necessarily that you know the interactions. It's more necessary that you know when you need to ask.
Yeah.
Everybody's like, yeah, I'm not really sure. I'm going to have to call a judge, and, they get the right ruling on it. Does kind of telegraph that James may have a removal spell for Rest in Peace, but...
I know when it gets confusing is when you have something in play that causes something to be exiled on Resolution and you're killing it with damage, like Lightning Bolt on Dryad Militant.
That's different than Doomblade on Dryad Militant.
Yeah.
Enchantments, however, that's a whole nother issue.
Yeah.
Yeah. True Name Nemesis played for Craig. And I believe they both end up in graveyards. I believe it's similar to the Doomblade on Dryad Militant scenario. All right, True Name cast for Craig, so he did have a good draw there. However, James has it covered. He's hung onto this copy of Golgari Charm. And he needs to make sure he's playing around Spell Pierce, but thanks to Thoughtseize, he knows about Spell Pierce.
Yeah, and he can still sequence this by casting the Golgari Charm. Although it's rough because he needs to get the Rest in Peace off the table first, because if he -1/-1s with the Golgari Charm, he ends up killing his own Tarmogoyf. So he has to set this up kind of awkwardly.
Yeah. And I actually think he may just kill his own Tarmogoyf.
I would be
He doesn't
surprised.
want to. Yeah, I mean, he wouldn't want to. Well, he still has Charlotte's Agent to recoup the cards. If he draws a land here, which he does, now he can do all of the above. Well, no, he's still short. What am I saying? No, because if he waits, so you're saying he'd wait a turn before killing the True Name?
Yeah,
First.
he may take one hit.
That does mean, though, he knows there's double Spell Pierce here, so he can't actually do that because he'll be victimized by the second Spell Pierce. And so he wants to make sure that he plays around single Spell Pierce while it's only single Spell Pierce that's up.
Okay.
And so we see here James getting rid of his own Tarmogoyf. So at some cost, the hardest thing is that he didn't get rid of any of Craig's Spell Pierces in that process, but he still does have Charlotte's Agent to pull himself ahead. That was a 2-for-1, but True Name is one of the few cards left in Craig's deck that James has to deal with.
And there's only 2 copies in the main deck, no copies in the sideboard. So maybe it's worth giving up some equity there when it's one of the very few text boxes left in Craig's deck that is significant.
Yeah, the Batterskull's gone. A True Name's gone. I don't think Delvers and Stoneforges are that scary anymore.
Of removal, plenty of Abrupt Decays for that kind of stuff.
Yeah. With Rest in Peace, as you said, Grim Lavamancers are gone. There aren't many damage sources left in Craig's deck. And at 17, James isn't going to get burned out either.
Sure.
He doesn't need much to win the game as a result. He needs, a 4 power of creatures, and they can be Deathrite Shamans for all that matters. Craig, drawing another one of his few threats remaining. This is going to be Stoneforge Mystic. And does he have equipment remaining? What does he have left? I think he still has his Sword of Feast and Famine left. He's going to go ahead and grab that.
Yep. Better than the Jitei in this spot, much higher upside. He's actually able to get this onto something, then it cuts off certain removal spells like Disfigure and so forth.
This sword is one of the most important cards left in Craig's deck. James does currently, I believe, have it covered in the form of an Abrupt Decay. And we see his draw Liliana of the Veil.
And he does know about the 2 Spell Pierces, so he can, if he wants to, crack his fetch lands and go ahead and play around Spell Pierce.
No, he just has to play the second fetch land, right? He doesn't even have to crack it.
Yeah, he doesn't have to crack it. I think that he may want to hold Liliana in the event that Craig is able to sneak something into play and put the sword on it in the same turn. And Edict gives him a lot more insurance against, Craig drawing a Delver and sneaking a sword onto it while James taps out. So,
yeah. Well, he does still have Abrupt Decay for the sword. So it may be, if he's just in his mind locked into already Abrupt Decaying this sword, then he could make that play. But he has a great alternative play here too. Charlotte's Agent, great play. And he's just going to go for that, establishing his own board. And we'll see what it cascades into, going through a lot of lands on top of his deck. And still cascading. And that's a pretty good one. Cascading into Disfigure with 2 up.
That's mighty fine as well.
That was a very nice cascade.
He doesn't have that many bad cascades, in fairness. It's really, I guess, Tarmogoyf and Deathrite Shaman if James is kind of committed to playing the game with Rest in Peace in play for the time being.
Yeah, I suppose, in all fairness, it could have been an Ancestral Visions. If he has them left. I don't know if those are all left in the deck at this point. Probably most are, I would think. But the problem is, if you're being beaten up on a tempo game, Ancestral Visions doesn't really help you. But my guess is this matchup grinds enough where he still has them.
So Craig going to do some searching here. But he's running out of ways to win.
Yeah, he goes ahead and brainstorms. He does see a pair of Delvers here, so he's finding most of his remaining threats. They're going to have to do a lot of work. The sword will help. Once again, James can Abrupt Decay the sword. But Craig may be able to sneak some damage through. Right now, he actually has more threats than James has removal. So if he's aggressive here, there's a shot.
The big thing is that Craig, I feel like, really needs to try to sneak the sword onto something. He's very unlikely to win the game, I think, just by connecting with Insectile Aberration, and in fact is losing the race as currently constituted because there is a Starless Agent and a Creeping Tar Pit on James' side of the table.
Right, so Craig's going to start off with this sword. And that's going to be fine. Going to crack a fetch, tapping out for Delver. And I would think that James is going to Abrupt Decay.
It seems like a good sequence to Abrupt Decay and play Liliana.
Yeah, he has Craig tapped out. Nothing sneaky. James's 2 remaining cards can take care of both of Craig's permanents.
Yeah.
And as you said before, once again, just like in Game 2, Craig played a Rest in Peace, resolved it. James, despite having, Golgari Charm, Abrupt Decay, when Craig cast the Rest in Peace, never chose to remove the Rest in Peace and looks to be controlling the board through it.
The Rest in Peace has felt better for me this game because Craig probably would have just lost to the Tarmogoyf early on, but it is part of a larger systemic problem with the approach of the matchup, which is trying to just be too controlling.
All right, and we'll see if on end step James wants to Abrupt Decay. It certainly is saves on his mana, but like uncracked fetch lands have a lot of value here, not to mention some life points have value. And so James said he's going to start on a Thoughtseize, goes to 15, see what he's working against. Ponder Delver. Not too bad.
And James doesn't even have to necessarily blow up the sword. He can try to play the game in such a way to blow up everything Craig plays.
Yeah.
And if the sword is able to sneak onto something, then he can simply remove the sword with the Abrupt Decay. So he has a lot of flexibility with his approach here.
Yeah, so that last Brainstorm by Craig, really helpful. As you recall, Craig had 2 Spell Pierces in his hand. Thanks to Brainstorm plus Fetchland, both those Spell Pierces got shuffled away.
It wouldn't surprise me if James just took the Delver Secret, saying here, he's asking maybe to see Craig's Exile pile here. Just checking to see how many ways Craig has left to win the game. He's running out.
Yeah, he can count threats here. Remember, Craig's deck only plays 10 creatures. And 10 creatures, 3 pieces of equipment. That's it. 4 lightning bolts, if you add those.
But James is well outside of burn range.
Yeah. He can actually just, he can actually just answer all of Craig's threats. So which way does he want to do it? If he hits the Delver, he buys himself more immediate time, but hitting Ponder probably does more long-term damage. Let's see what the choice is. He's going to go for Ponder.
Yeah, I like taking the Ponder here after some evaluation because if the rest of the sequence here is play Liliana and minus it to kill your Delver of Secrets, things get really hairy if Craig just rips his last True Name Nemesis off the top.
Right.
He gets the sword,
and
he can't, kill the True Name Nemesis in time before it takes care of Liliana.
So Shardless Agent swings it, dealing damage to Craig. Does Craig flip his Delver? He does off a Jataxian Probe. James is going to have to care about this at some point. Like I said, Craig currently has more threats than James has removal. So we'll see if he can turn that into an advantage. Jataxian Probe shows that Craig is facing a pretty good hand on James' side. And just draw for the turn. A Stoneforge Mystic. So he is hitting many of his remaining, it can't be more than 5 creatures left in his deck.
It's not a lot, and they're all very threatening in the face of this sword.
Yeah, so James is going to have to use the Abrupt Decay on the Delver. This means that sword gets to stick around, and now that Craig has 2 more creatures, James doesn't have the removal for all of these. This sword may get to stick onto something.
Yeah, I mean, Liliana is just an edict, and Craig has a spare creature now, the Stoneforge Mystic, so Craig may be right back in this.
Wow, and this is a game that seemed like it was going James's way, but I don't know if it's still there. His draw, no help, it's a land. And yeah, sword's going to connect to something this next turn.
Wow, that was a big set of draws there for Craig.
Yep, Liliana Edicts. Gets to pick which one he loses. I imagine Craig will, well, it's interesting, right? The Delver can fly, but it also can get, I guess, Golgari Charmed. So there's...
Well, next turn it's getting the sword put on.
Yeah, it's, okay, so it's getting the sword, so it doesn't matter. So he'll keep the Delver.
He may feel like he needs to get the Jitte out of his hand right now, too. I mean, James is getting hit from a bunch of different angles.
Yeah, so does he, yeah, you're right. So does he want to get the Jitte? If he gets the Jitte, he likely will not kill either of the creatures with this Liliana.
No, that Liliana is gone.
Yeah, the Liliana gets 1 activation. The only way it gets a second, I guess if it goes down to 1, Craig might give it a second activation because he doesn't really care about the plus. Yeah, it's going to go to 4, so he's nuking the Jitte. And that guy's not going to be able to block anyway, so Charlotte's Agent does what he can. He's going to attack.
Well, now this means, by attacking with the Charlotte's Agent, it means that Liliana goes down even if Delver doesn't flip, which was not the case before.
And Delver does flip. This is actually pretty important here. So the one thing is that Craig, so if that hadn't flipped, Craig only had 4 power on his side of the battlefield, whereas James actually had 5 power worth of creatures and a Liliana that Craig needed to work through. So James was up on life, up on rate. Like, he was winning the race, and I'm not even sure he's losing the race yet. It's closer now.
Yeah, he's going to have to go just, I think, straight to the Creeping Tar Pit and the Charlotte's Agent here and hope that's good enough.
Yeah, what I really like from James is the discipline he has shown on these fetch lands throughout the whole match. This has come down to a racing situation, and the fact that he was really patient and not cracking these fetches has really bought him some leeway at this point in the game. So we do see he does have to crack 1 of the fetches if he wants to swing with Creeping Tar Pit. So he'll go ahead and do that. Remember, James's swings are for 5, so he has a 3-turn clock. Craig's swings are for 6. That's also a 3-turn clock. So if Craig can't add to his board, James actually currently, I think, has the better clock. There's some murkiness because Craig can swing 5 in the air, throw the sword over to the Stoneforge, and then pass back. Then James can only swing with Tar Pit, so it's 5 versus 3,
right?
Not 6 to 5.
And it looks like Craig may be deciding to pump the brakes as you just described.
Yeah, well, he doesn't have to pump him much, right? He can swing the Delver and do 5, and then throw the sword to the Stoneforge. He doesn't actually lose any of his clock when he does that.
Yeah, now he's back up in front. James only attacking for 3 at a shot. That's 3 turns, and Craig finished off in 2. I mean, moving the sword comes with some amount of risk. It means now the Insectile Aberration is exposed to Disfigure.
Yeah, the issue here is that for James to race, he has to tap for Creeping Tar Pit each turn. So his ability to play his top decks comes at the cost of his attack. And right now he's going to activate Tar Pit, swinging for 3. That drops Craig down to 5. And what would have helped, what he really would have hoped there, well, no, there's recipes. I'm going to say Deathrite Shaman could have dealt the last 2, but that's not even true.
Yep.
So sword goes over to Insectile Aberration. He swings for 5 in the air. James is down to 3. Discards Tarmogoyf.
Not bothering to cast in the Rest in Peace. Doesn't want to crack those fetch lands.
Yeah, it's a 0-1, and it certainly isn't chumping. So James down to his last draw. Can he get out of this? And he hasn't scooped it yet. We'll see what he drew. Another Shardless Agent.
All right, this is huge.
Yeah, not Liliana. Deathrite Shaman, that's not going to do it.
That's not it.
Wow, and in a great comeback fashion in Game 3, Craig Krempels, 2-1, your SCG Legacy Champion in Somerset.
A well-deserved pump of the fist there. That game looked like it was going terribly for Craig. I mean, and the middle turns there.
Yeah.
It looked like James had full command of that situation, but Craig was able to, navigate that well enough, get a sword into play, and then overwhelm Liliana in 1 turn, and James just missed enough draw steps there for Craig to seal it. Congratulations, just really impressive there. I thought he was done for, to be quite honest with you.
There was a turn at some point in the game where James had 2 Abrupt Decays and a Golgari Charm, and I remember thinking James has all of Craig's cards covered and a bonus kill spell, and
James, it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And a Creeping Tar Pit, I mean, that wasn't even the end of it, he had more resources to work with.